Welcome to the latest episode. I probably changed the theme song. Hey everyone, latest episode of Mondays in MMORPGs. I did come prepared this week. I'm
Nice.
gonna butcher the name because this is an Italian wine. Poggio Civetta. I'm not sure. It's a Chianti. I like Chianti, so I just opened it. It's been breathing for the last 15 minutes. So I'm going to pour as we get ready. I'm assuming you have your tea.
Oh, yes. Like usual, green tea today
Green tea.
was goji.
Goji tea.
Very good.
All right, so salud. Cheers. I don't know how you
Cheers.
say that in French. It's
Santé.
sauté.
It means health.
That's what salud means in Spanish, so it's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's got a nice bite to it. I actually had already tried this wine last week, which is why I went and had bought another bottle of it. And then I had a really nice bottle of it's a Mexican wine, Lechedo. They had no, excuse me, it was an Argentinian. I believe it's Argentinian. Finca Las Moras. They had a Reserva Malbec, which unfortunately I opened that on Monday and it didn't last until today because it was so good that I've had a couple glasses every day and I finished it off yesterday. So it was like, well, I've
Oh,
got
no, no more wine for the episode. Oh.
no, I have a couple of backup bottles this week. Chris and I went
Okay.
shopping on Sunday and made sure
You
that I
see,
had plenty.
guys, this man is well prepared every time.
I am
He
prepared.
always has a backup plan.
So first and foremost, I think kind of the whole MMORPG industry was kind of rocked a couple of days ago with the news of Brad McQuaid's passing. So for those who don't know, he was one of the original founders and creators of EverQuest. That's where he made his name as kind of like the creative driving force there and the lead programmer. And then eventually went on to create Sigil Games and the much aligned but much loved Vanguard Saga of Heroes. Both of those games have served as a heavy source of inspiration for what we are building with Saga Leucemia. And I know a lot of people like to, crap on Brad for his personal flaws and, missteps that happen professionally. But I think that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has flaws. It's one of those things where there is no doubt that the man, kind of redefined and built the MMORPG industry as we know it, especially if you look at the impact that EverQuest had, because, Ultima Online obviously was, a little bit before that and was doing its own thing, but even they never came close to achieving the same level of impact on the commercial scale that EverQuest did in terms of just, showing people that a 3D version of Dungeons and Dragons could be done, and that's it was my first MMORPG. It was the first MMORPG for many people on our team. So we want to raise a glass to Brad / Aradune, and cheers to the Pantheon. Yeah, and cheers to the Pantheon team because I know they're going to continue on and make that vision come to fruition, and we can't wait to see it. So salud.
A lot of courage for you after this loss. It must be always difficult when you lose the father of a project.
And it brings something into perspective because I know there's a lot of people who will say that, well, Pantheon is now doomed to failure because Brad's no longer around. And I know in my Discord channel somebody mentioned that, and I said, well, I don't really think that's true. I know that looking at our team as an example, yes, I was the person who brought everyone together. And yes, I am certainly a driving force for the Saga Leucemia, but I am not the only person on the team. An MMORPG cannot be built by one person. It is a multi-person thing. It requires a team. So it would definitely impact the company if something were to happen to me. But at the same time, I'm confident that there's enough layout and enough advanced planning, and there's enough on the books for the team to continue on, even if something were to happen. The only thing that would be missing would be, for example, the book volumes. But as far as the game outline and everything needed for Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4, that's pretty much already been set in place. as far as design documents go. So, there's, you know, yeah, it definitely impacts a team, but, there's always a team effort. So it will move on and continue.
It, it, it all depends too, because I believe that some people really give the soul to a game or to a project. They put so much of themselves into it that it's imbuing the project. And if they are gone, it will all depend if someone can maintain the vision or maybe doing another vision but as good at that one. But there's still something, a touch that someone, otherwise it will not be a good project leader.
Yeah,
If
it's
it,
true.
if it was not shaping just by being there, just by, it's overflow from his head and it's shaping the whole thing. So hopefully, Pantheon will do good. Hopefully, the project is far enough advanced anyway to really continue, and hopefully, there's someone that can replace the leadership and the vision of Brad McQuaid.
Yeah,
May it be in the same line or in a different line, but that's good.
it's tricky, but I think it's possible, and I think they've got a good head start. So we are eagerly anticipating their continuation, and we can't wait to play it. So
Yeah, and we wish them the very, very
very best of
best.
luck. Today we got a couple of topics we're going to cover. First and foremost, I know a very hot topic in a couple of the Discord channels. So in Renfell's Refuge, which is my personal Discord channel, the hot topic this week has been matchmaking systems. And in the Saga of Leucemia Discord channel for our World of Warcraft group, the loot system and Need Before Greed system has been heavily discussed. So I think first I want to start off with the matchmaking system, and then we'll go into loot after that, because I kind of think matchmaking ties into loot in the greater scheme of things, and I'll explain that in a minute.
Yeah.
Basically, in the sense that for me, before matchmaking systems ever came along, one of the reasons that I always preferred to group with guildmates as opposed to pickup individuals was because you can trust the people in your guild when you've been grouping with them on a regular basis, because you have built up that social relationship and that friendship with them. So there's no need, you don't have to worry about people abandoning you in the middle of a dungeon, or obviously people have life, oh crap, my wife needs to go to the hospital. That's understandable. But a lot of times with pickup people, it's like you don't even get a warning. They're just like, oh, I gotta go, and they're gone. And it's like we're like halfway through the dungeon. And the other side of that was and is ninja looting, and or not being considerate of other people, looting for the sake of, my favorite is, I'm going to need on every single thing that drops because I need the coin to buy my mount. And traditionally, Need Before Greed is, well, you should only need on it if you're going to equip it then and there, and it's an actual upgrade for you. So the matchmaking system ties into the loot system because of the trust and the socialization. But I do want to talk about, first and foremost, I want to talk about the impact that matchmakers have had on the MMORPG industry. I know this is a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yes, exactly. We have been talking about that so
Many
much
times.
already.
Um,
And
and
we
it's
can rant about it.
Yes,
There
we
will be
can.
no room for the loots this time.
There
This
might
will be
not
for
be.
next episode.
It could be. It could be. So we'll see if we can't get to the loot system today. But if not, you'll have to wait till next week. So let's start off and talk about, in the grand scope of things, talking about the pros of the matchmaking system. I think before we throw them under the bus is probably a good thing, because there are some pros to the system, in the sense that the matchmaking systems have definitely made it more convenient for a lot of people to be able to jump into a dungeon scenario or some sort of a group-based scenario. And I think that makes sense for certain games that are based around 15-minute dungeon runs. But when you start looking at, say, the first generation of MMORPGs like EverQuest, or even some of the larger instances in World of Warcraft, definitely the larger instances in EverQuest 2, these are dungeons and scenarios where you're going to be in there for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. I can remember when Unrest first unlaunched, it was such a big zone for EverQuest 2 that it was persistent, in the sense that you could go in, clear up to a certain point, log out, come back the next day, and you would have saved your progress, and you could just continue from wherever you picked up. And as I recall, it took our guild like 12 hours, I think, to clear Unrest the first time we did it, because we didn't know anything. There was no walkthroughs. We were just going in, and our group was working on it, and it took us, I think, 4 nights maybe. It's been a long time, but um, in the sense of the short sessions, that matchmaking system can be good for helping players get together and find content. But in my opinion, the cons far outweigh the positives, in the sense that what's being discussed in our Discord channel is that, first and foremost, using a matchmaking system, people almost never talk to the other people in their group, because you've literally, instead of needing to have a conversation to form the group in the first place, people just put their name in this automated system, and it matched them with other people and then teleported them all at the same time to the dungeon entrance. And no one had to communicate or socialize or say, hey, I've only got 2 hours. Is that going to be okay? Blah, 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 blah. And then all the times that I've used matchmakers in Star Wars: The Old Republic and other games, Final Fantasy 14, I've never, ever grouped with the same person beyond that initial instance. So you kind of lose the communication, and you also lose the ability to form friendships. I know that you have things you want to say on this topic, so I will turn it over to you and let you rant a bit.
Yeah,
LOL, the Rantosaurus is back.
it's a vast subject, but I think it's important to resituate this Indian story. And the dungeon finder arrived with World of Warcraft. So it arrived at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, which was the most celebrated, most popular expansion, or the most successful in terms of number of people expansion that World of Warcraft created. And at that time of Wrath of the Lich King, they had already simplified a little bit their dungeon system, so it was not as labyrinthic than the vanilla one, which I guess were inspired from EverQuest that I never played, but I imagine they were more in that line. And then they simplified in Burning Crusade, and they simplify them again in terms of layout and speed and number of bosses. In Wrath of the Lich King, so you had really a very straightforward experience, basically. Before that, in World of Warcraft, you had to create your group by yourself. There was no tool. So you had to be looking for a tank. Therefore, you need to have a tank friend list or a good guild where you can say, or just know people on your server. And I remember that at that time, there was a lot of group, even a red, that were organized by players from the server. You knew you had to avoid Dragon Poland's warriors because they were just trolling you, and you could make trust Naibus or whatever because it was going to do a successful raid. Once the dungeon finder came in, it changed the face of World of Warcraft forever, and also the rest of the industry by consequences, as it was the most successful game at that time. I really saw the difference, and many people saw that from one day to the next. Suddenly, the matchmaking allow you to group up with four different person in addition of yourself. Everything was automated. You were teleported immediately in the instance. This removed the server identity, the need of being a nice and brilliant player. This removed to be friendly with loot. This removed the necessity or the possibility of doing world PvP in front of the dungeon entrance. It happened a lot. It was fun or not fun, depending of your point of view, but it was an activity. It was part of the world. It removed the travel system. It really made it faster and faster. So beyond the behavior of the players, what it does, it changed so much how the players behaved and were doing the dungeon. Instead of having a long adventure to do, they were doing the dungeon as fast as possible to have their loot. They didn't need to socialize. They needed to go as fast. So World of Warcraft had to change also the difficulty of those dungeons so they could be shorter, faster, to really give you a good experience of a matchmaker system. And I think for a very long time I was super mad at this system, and I think it has damaged the industry. Nowadays, the world has changed so much that my opinion have maybe slightly changed. But that I will explain later why.
Sure. I think from my perspective, like I said, I think it makes sense to have that system in certain games um, that are meant to be for the casual player who's only going to log in for 30 minutes. Talking about EverQuest, you had mentioned you never played it and that you weren't sure how the original vanilla dungeons for World of Warcraft were designed, if they were designed with EverQuest in mind, and I can say they weren't because even from the very first dungeon that you do, or the very first dungeon that I came across in World of Warcraft Classic, which was Dread Mines, I think is what it's called, where you fight like the
Dead
pirate
man, yeah,
pirate
yeah.
guy. Um, it's very straightforward. It's very linear. It has a beginning and an end, and you're meant to follow a very linear path to get to the end of that dungeon. There was never in any of the original EverQuest zones, there was never a beginning and an end. The way those dungeons were laid out was that they were multiple tiered, multiple levels. Pretty much all the dungeons were like this. A good example would be, say, Befallen, which is a zone in outside of Freeport, which was meant for humans, for the human starting areas and stuff. But it was an undead dungeon, and it was like a catacombs, crypt kind of area. But you would go in, and you could start it at level 7, but to get to you had to progress to the second level, to the third level, to the fourth level, to the fifth, in terms of going deeper and deeper into the dungeon. And to get deeper and deeper, you had to get keys and beat certain mobs. And as I recall, that dungeon went from level 7 to level 25-ish maybe at the top end, and that's a very small range compared to some of the other dungeons, which might have a range of say 20 levels. So these were places that were meant, the way the dungeons in EverQuest were designed was they weren't meant to be done in a linear fashion. Um, it was very much meant to be your group comes in, you're this level, you're meant to handle this wing. And so you do that wing for 3 or 4 levels. And given how slow leveling was in EverQuest 1, we actually did this years ago, probably 4 years ago now. I did on right when Twitch very first, like when I was first getting started on Twitch and stuff, we did um, to prove a point basically because people were on mmorpg.com. There was a lot of people saying that there's no such thing as dungeons that can last three weeks or more, and I said that's not true. You don't know what you're talking about. We're going to prove it to you. So we went on Project 1999, which is the EverQuest emulator server. We started a brand new series of characters, and we leveled them up over the course of a few sessions. Got to level 7, went into Fallen, and we then spent 3 weeks, and all we did was level in Befallen during our sessions, and we played 3 nights a week and spent 3 weeks going from level 7 to level 20 in the same dungeon, but just doing different portions of that dungeon as we went along. So instead of having a linear 2 hour experience, it was a no, 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 you're going to spend 4 or 5 sessions over here, then you're going to progress over here and spend 4 or 5 sessions there, then you're going to progress here. And the bad part about this is that if there's groups who are deeper in the dungeon than you, there's no leashing on mobs. So other groups who were deeper into the dungeon who got into trouble would run out, and this would cause what became known as trains. And those trains, basically, as you're running out, those bad guys are grabbing all of their friends and continuing to chase that person until they either kill them or that person zones out. And what would often happen is a higher level group would come through and train into your group when you're sitting there, you've been playing for 2 hours and everything's hunky dory, and all of a sudden here comes all these mobs that are like 20 levels higher than you, and they just wipe your group immediately. And then you have corpse runs, and corpse runs were one of those scenarios where, for better or for worse, they were very harsh in terms of death penalties, but they also formed a lot of friendships because if you died in the depths of a dungeon and all your gear is on your body, it wasn't just a simple matter of like, well, like in World of Warcraft, I'm a ghost and I can either run back and get my corpse or I can choose to take a hit and, lose some gold. It was everything's on my corpse. Like I'm screwed unless I can get my corpse, which means I got to ask for help. And you're either going to ask for help from your friends or you're going to ask for help from the server community. So that led to a lot of friendships being formed in terms of people just helping each other naturally as a course of playing the game. But yeah, the dungeons in EverQuest 1 were a lot different than World of Warcraft in the sense that they were built on this massive epic scale where they weren't meant to be done in one session. They were meant to be played over the course of, multiple sessions, possibly weeks and months, which is what we're trying to do with Saga Lucemia is kind of replicate that experience. So instead of doing these instanced, um,
Hmm.
you know, linear runs, we're doing these very big open places where, there's going to be 3 to 5 levels. When I say levels, I mean I should say tiers, like 3 to 5 tiers of difficulty in each one of these places, so that you go in, you're meant to do this tier. A couple weeks later, you can move to the next tier. A couple weeks later, you can move to the next tier. So it's a lot different than the Warcraft experience. I know that playing Warcraft, I can now see where EverQuest 2 took things from in terms of when EverQuest 2 launched. It was slightly before World of Warcraft launched, but they did a very similar um, later on. The very first dungeons in EverQuest 2 were built much like EverQuest 1. They were
Uh,
instanced that they were not instanced, excuse me, but you would go in and you would just have these big open spaces, and you would have just tiers of difficulty. But once Warcraft came out, the first expansion that EverQuest 2 launched, the Desert of Flames, they introduced instances, and those were not in the launch package. So they looked at what World of Warcraft did and said, "Oh, that's working very well. We should do that." So when that first expansion launched for EverQuest 2, suddenly we went from having these huge sprawling dungeons that you would spend several weeks in to having these instances that you would spend 3 to 4 hours in, on the upper end, and then on the low end you'd spend an hour, hour and a half. So they've replicated that
mhm.
scenario. But even EverQuest 2 never had the matchmaking system. I don't know if they have it now or not, but I know the way they always did it before, when I played it for like 7 years, was you eventually they introduced a looking for group panel, which is essentially what we're looking to kind of do with our game, which is you can open up this panel and you can choose what role that you are playing, and you can flag yourself as looking for a group, and then there's a panel for people who are looking for group, and then there's a panel for groups who are looking for people. So you know using that scenario, it's not a matchmaking system, but it does facilitate it facilitates finding groups, but it still requires players to communicate with each other because, hey, I see you're looking for a group. Are you still looking for a group, or did you forget to turn it off? Like, are you at the beginning of your session or at the end of your session? Do you have 2 hours? Do you want to come do this with us, etc.? Um, that's something that doesn't happen in like WoW Live or any other game that has a matchmaking system, which is why I was very interested when Classic came out, and they
Actually,
said that they weren't going to allow that add-on because they wanted people talking to each other.
World of Warcraft has come back to that. So you in and I think it's very important to mention that because you have games that refuse to implement the dungeon finder, so the matchmaking system. Some, unfortunately, under the pressure of the community, ended by doing so. I'm speaking about Rift, I'm speaking about Star Wars The Old Republic. Wherever Guild Wars 2 only creates this kind of tool you're describing. And World of Warcraft nowadays do have the same system as well. So they have the matchmaking system where you can just queue and you will be picked up, and you have the looking for group tool, which is mostly used for reds and for Mythic Plus, because Mythic Plus and red, you cannot really do them so well with a puck. If you are a pug and you just want to do it, you just go doing the LFR, the whatever, etc. But if you want to do Mythic Plus, which is the new things that World of Warcraft is organizing, so it's a new way of playing dungeon, which is pretty cool. It's very challenging, but it's challenging under pressure. So you will have the same dungeon that you have done in normal and heroic version, and in Mythic normal version. But then in the Mythic Plus, what's happening is that you have a timer. So you need to execute the dungeon before the timer ends if you want to succeed it completely. And that will give you a key for another dungeon of a higher level. So give you, you finish your dungeon in time, then you receive a key Mythic plus 2.
Okay.
Then you can do a dungeon in Mythic plus 2, which will be a little bit more difficult. And if you succeed in time, you will have a key for a dungeon, Mythic plus 3. And you have a lot of different more you grind in the level of those dungeons, more you will have difficulties added. For instance, the bosses are stronger, or you have extra mobs, and it will change every week. So this is the new system of World of Warcraft,
Okay.
and as that can be very challenging if you do like 10 plus, etc. You need to find a good group with the right composition. You cannot, you need a rogue maybe for that dungeon, or you want a mage, and not just tank healer and random 3 DPS.
I know in Classic, from my experience so far, it has been as a tank. So I have a protection warrior. Everything about the protection warrior in Warcraft is I need rage to use my taunts, and my abilities do taunts and etc. Um, but it's not like say EverQuest 2 where I have I have a series of taunts and I can just rotate through a chain of abilities and I can just keep the mobs focused on me all the time. World of Warcraft Classic anyway is much more about, the group needs to work in coordination. Obviously, I have that one panic button, that one taunt button that forces the mob onto me, but only if its attention is focused somewhere else, as opposed to EverQuest 2, where I'm continually building up threat because each one of my
Mhm.
abilities adds a certain amount of threat. It's very important in World of Warcraft Classic for me as the tank to initiate the combat because I'm getting rage when mobs are hitting me as also as being in combat and hitting mobs. If the mobs aren't hitting me and they're not doing damage, I'm not getting rage. Therefore, I cannot use any of my abilities, which in turn create additional threat. So I have done a few pickup groups, and unfortunately, I doubt I will do more as a tank. I don't have a problem in pickup groups as a healer or as a DPS, but as a tank, I just don't like doing pickup groups as a tank. And the reason for that is because what you were just talking about. You need to have people who are well oiled and who work well together and who are in voice chat together and who are coordinating pulls and coordinating what gets mezzed. And that's the other thing I really don't like about pickup groups is no one wants to mez mobs. They just want to AoE everything. And when people are AoEing, it's really difficult for me to keep aggro as a tank. So it's like it's much better for me to be in a group with my guild mates where I'm pulling 3 mobs in the camp. I've got a mage sheeping 1. I've got a warlock using his that crazy whip chick demon
Succubus, yeah.
succubus. That's the word I was looking for. The succubus to do the other one, and then we all focus on the one, burn it down, move to the next, and etc. And then if there's a oh shit scenario where we've got like 5 mobs in camp, I do have an AoE taunt, and I can also switch between targets and hit them with rend and other things to keep the attention on me. But I much prefer a controlled environment where we are focused on maximum DPS on single targets, AoEing when it's necessary, but it's a coordinated event. We're in voice chat, we're communicating, we're coordinating pulls, etc., etc., etc. And that doesn't happen in pickup groups, which is no big deal when I'm the healer because I'll just let them do what they want. Or it's no big deal when I'm the DPS because people can do what they want because I'm literally just going to attack whatever whatever I'm being told to attack. But
Mm,
the
I understand.
higher up we've gotten in dungeons, like I just hit 45 yesterday. The higher up you get, the more challenging the dungeons get. And also, I've noticed this might sound weird to people who have played Warcraft forever. I'm still new to all this, so I've been very pleased to see the difficulty of the dungeons has increased proportionally along with the levels. So the higher up the dungeons get, the more mechanics they start adding and the more strategy that's required to take out certain encounters as opposed to just everybody attack. My favorite so far has been Oldemon, I think is the name of the dungeon, which has like the Indiana Jones um, like
Vibes,
little
yeah.
little statue or miniature city where you put the staff in. And but what I'm talking
Yeah.
about is like the later on in that dungeon there's 2 fights in particular. The first one is there's you walk into this room and there's these golems around the edges, and everybody has to, you click on the thing in the middle and spawns one, and he comes, but when he dies he does an AoE. And it's like everyone needs to run out of range of that AoE when each one of these golems dies, so it requires the group to be focused on paying attention to when the mob's going to die, so that if there's melee or pets, we need to pull those out at like 10% or something so that we all don't take the damage, just the main tank. That requires strategy and forethought. Obviously, when people know the encounter, it's not that big of a deal. But I've gone in, there's several people who are new to World of Warcraft, so we're learning these things for the first time. And my favorite is that boss fight at the end of Uldaman where you're focused, you got the boss like summoning ads like the whole fight, and at first it's just like these little easy ads, and then he summons four of them at the same time, which are much harder, and it's like, oh shit, what just happened? And then it goes back to the easy ones, and then he calls two elites, and it's like, oh, this is like really not cool. And like that, we wiped a few times on that the first time we tried it because I had never done that before. And then there's other things like where they've added these uh, the lizard creatures which reflect spells. I'm blanking on their name right now. Basilisks, I think is what they're called. I mean, all of these little things don't exist in the early dungeons. The early dungeons are very much tank and spank. It's like, here's a mob, just burn it down. Maybe they do an AoE. I think Nomragon, that boss has like he does like an aggro dump, and you have to push the buttons for the ads, and then the bombs start coming. That
Yeah,
kind of.
but
Go ahead.
Gnomorgan, the difficulty of the Gnomorgan is not the bosses, is to not pull half of the planet with your pets if you have a hunter in the
Oh
group.
yeah, no,
Because
we did a couple with hunters. That was one of my worst pickup groups. We had a hunter in the group, and he just didn't take care of his pet, and it was going crazy. We
yeah,
wiped like 3 times.
yeah,
Also,
you have all those guys on the ostrich, mechanical ostrich that follow you. I remember
mm,
that.
and there's the stupid like the patrols that come in. If you don't kill the patrol soon enough, they bring ads. And then you have the bombs that the Dark Iron Dwarves are dropping, so you have to worry about killing the bombs before they go off, or if you don't have the DPS to take out the bombs, to move away from the bombs while you're fighting the mobs. So that was, it's been very pleasant to see the difficulty increase in the dungeons as I've gone up in level, because that comes back around to the conversation of needing to group up with talented people, because um, a lot of players, they it just depends. I've had good pickup groups and I've had bad pickup groups, but I've had enough bad ones as a tank that I don't group up with people anymore on my tank.
Mm.
I only group up with guildmates to do dungeons on my tank. But yeah, it's just too much of a risk. I don't want to waste my time having like 6 wipes, um, because people aren't paying attention. I think the worst pickup group I've had was, um, there was the paladin healer. We had a paladin healer and a druid who was supposed to be backup heals, and the druid decided that he didn't want to do backup heals anymore. He wanted to go, instead of doing balance, he wanted to go feral and do cat DPS. And the paladin decided that he's the healer, right? But he was the one who was doing all the pulling, and at the same time we had a mage in the group who refused to crowd control. He just AoE'd everything. So I mean, I'd be trying to, in a scenario where the healer is pulling all the mobs and gets them all on him, and then I'm trying to like pull mobs off him, and at the same time the mage is just constantly dropping AoEs, so the mobs are just going everywhere, and then they start yelling at me because the mobs are ping-ponging everywhere, and I'm like, this is not my fault that I can't hold aggro on all these mobs because you guys are playing like absolute idiots. And it's because they probably came from live where, a retribution paladin or whatever could just AoE stuff and hold aggro. And it's like, but this guy's spec holy. He's supposed to be healing, not pulling and doing damage. So finding good people is key. And that's one of the things I love about no matchmaker, because A, player reputation means something when you're looking for group without a matchmaking system, because if you have a reputation as a crappy player, you're not going to get groups. And this is also where I think it's very important that friendships are formed through communication, and this is the downside to the non-matchmaking way of things, is that it takes time to build trust with anybody, especially if you've never met them before. It takes time to build up to where you can know that person and trust that they're going to be a good player, or they're not going to need on every single item, which we'll talk about later. But they're actually going to be a nice player. They're not going to do stupid stuff. They're not going to pull half the zone. They're going to take care of their pet. They're going to CC the mobs properly. They're not going to go AFK for 30 minutes. There's a lot of factors in players and player reputation that comes into play when you're not using a matchmaking system. Um, and like you said, I mean, players as well as guilds become known for doing good things. Whether it's being the guild that consistently can take out the raid bosses and invites other people to come along for the ride, or it's the guild that that their guild members are always going to be an asset to your group. So if they join your group, you're like, yeah, I don't have to worry about them. Like they know how to play. That kind of stuff is very important, and you lose that in the matchmaking system.
Yeah, I agree. Now there is other advantage that the matchmaking system bring into the gaming world, and I think it's because it has softened with the years. So it was really horrible when it became live, because people were really asshole at that time, or selfish people or mute people. It doesn't matter. I remember one day to have done a dungeon with people in World of Warcraft. I guess it was Cataclysm or something. And I say to myself, damn, when I play Dragon Age, I have the feeling my group is more talkative than this one. And they're
Nobody
just
talks,
NPCs.
yeah.
But I think a lot of people have been tired of that, and they are looking for a different kind of experience. I've seen that a lot of the pugs that we're doing were a lot more friendly than before. And in World of Warcraft, I've actually made friends through pugging.
Are you talking live or classic?
Live, not classic, in live. Doing Mythic Plus. So it's not using really the matchmaking system, but the other tools that we're talking about, where you need to be a little bit more careful.
Sure.
So here it's more the difficulty. But what's nice in World of Warcraft with the matchmaking system, you just want to do dungeon and chill out, listening music or whatever, and then you can chain dungeon, level your character. I really love to do that. I want to be chill, listen to nice, chill, relaxing music. I'm streaming in the same times, and who want to join me, join me. And now you have a very nice flexibility in World of Warcraft that you didn't have before. So people just join my group. They can invite themselves. I don't even need to do it myself. Then we go in the group finder, and here we go. We have dungeon, and it's all chill and relaxed. It's another playstyle, but it's also very pleasant. So in a way, I start to appreciate it. I'm a little bit cheating because I'm not entirely making just joining a group entirely new. Two, I don't mind to do it. And every time I find myself a very unpleasant tank, the kind of tank that are just like rushing through. I always play healers. The one that's rushing, never wait for the healer, etc., stay out of range, whatever. I take it as a personal challenge. Let's see if I can handle the situation. If I can counter it, instead of being mad at it, I say, let's see how far I can go.
This got brought up yesterday too. On that note, the people who rush. So like Chobo is one of our community members, or not Chobo, it's Rev, I think. They never played EverQuest 1. In I forget who it was now. I don't think it's either one of those guys. It doesn't really matter. We have a community member who's playing Project 99 with us, 1999 with us on Sunday mornings, and they've never played EverQuest before. So they're really enjoying this aspect of taking their time, and it's very frustrating to them when they join a group of players who are just trying to like rush to a goal or rush to the max. And I've had the same experience in Warcraft because I'm new to Classic. I'm taking my time to read the quest dialogue and everything else. And the times I've been in pugs, no one waits for me to read the quest dialogue. It's like I'm still like at the quest NPC, and like someone's off and they've pulled mobs and somebody's died and they're yelling at me, and it's like I didn't tell you I was ready. Like nobody did a ready check. Like I'm reading the quest dialogue and figuring out where I need to go while everyone else has Questy or these other add-ons that are installed so they know exactly where to go to get the mobs or to get the quest updates. And I'm actually reading the dialogue. I think it's more important to have those relaxed encounters where you can take your time and play at your own speed. Personal challenge. That's crazy. I can't stand grouping with people that rush like that.
I think that's why I like to be the own boss of my groups.
Hmm.
When I join a group like a pug and I'm just joining, I take it as oh, okay, I will try to be adaptable, but otherwise I will do my group and I do it my way. That's why I do it. So I do it clearly, and that's why I prefer from far the dungeon finder where you can no not the dungeon finder, the group maker panel things where you can announce your group. Then I say chill and relax, new players welcome, please be kind, that kind of stuff, be patient, whatever, or come to watch my stream. Some stuff
It's good
like
self
that.
promotion.
Yeah, of
I know
course.
that that's definitely the route that we're going with our game. I also look back. I know for as many experiences as I've had, I've never really ever had to look for group. First of all, I'm a social, outgoing person, so I've never had a problem finding groups. I'm also not the type of player who sits there in a zone and only does OOC. Like, even back in the day, I would go to the forums and I would make a post and say, "Hey guys, I play a ranger. I play these time slots. Who wants to join me for these time slots?" And within 2 to 3 days, I'd have a full group of players who were regularly meeting on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Saturdays. And every couple months you'd lose one of the members because life would happen or whatever the case would be, and you'd find somebody else to replace him. But I never have had to sit around and look for a group. And I know that's one of the things that people often talk about when they talk about the matchmaking system and why they like it is because they don't have to ever sit around and look for group. And that's something that many introverts have suffered with over the years is people have talked about spending 3 hours looking for a group in EverQuest, and that's their whole session. And it's like they didn't get to do anything because they were just looking for a group. And it's like, well, in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of your own fault for not finding a group because you were in one zone and there's like 70 zones that players are playing in, and you went to one and only tried to find a group there. The flip side of World of Warcraft is you have those global chat channels where you can, looking for a group is worldwide as opposed to zone wide. Um, Even in World of Warcraft, I don't think anybody that I know of has ever had to wait more than a few minutes for a group because there's a great population in Classic. Um, but I thought it was interesting when World of Warcraft, the Classic developers would not allow the add-on that would help
Mm,
players find groups. They said, no, we want you to be social. We want you to communicate.
yeah.
And I think the numbers that World of Warcraft Classic has shows that players very much do enjoy social gaming, even without the matchmaker. And they enjoy
Yeah.
needing to talk to each other and coordinate. And I've seen every night, every day, in looking for group, people are putting together Onyxia raids and Molten Core raids, and it's just people getting together doing stuff.
And the fact that you don't have a matchmaking system in the classic World of Warcraft experience is so much part of this experience itself. I have very bright memory of me trying to find a group in certain condition, um, and the tricks that you were using to make your group. It was also part of the economy. You had those people that were key holder to open Stratorm or to open UBRS, and they were selling. Yeah, I'm a key holder. I'm selling. I'm going to open for you the door, but you give me 10 gold. And then
That's
they
fair.
go
Yeah.
into they go into group, they open the doors and leave the group, and that's what they are doing because they have done this long chain quest to have the key, blah blah blah. And so it's part of how the game were played. With a matchmaking system, you could not do that. You could not do those things. Oh, I have a key. Oh, yes, you are precious. You have a key. Be my best friend. Oh, I'm a good rogue, or I'm a good mage that bring water, or whatever. So, but whoever a
Food and
tool that
water.
allow people to make group instead of yelling in the zone chat, I think that's nice because it's a help, but it still force people to socialize. It give also people the occasion to advert their group the way they want. They can say fast run, know your shit. Fair enough, you want to do a good run fast and with good players. Fair enough. Chill, relax player. I'm learning tanking. Please be nice. Why not? If you want to learn tanking, well, you need to learn it. And if you don't have friends yet, it might be the occasion to make new friends. So I think that is for me, it is the best solution is to have such a tool because it really allows people to make their group more easily, and it does not remove the social aspect from creating those groups.
I was thinking about the first time we did, for example, the first time I did Scarlet Monastery Cathedral. It was like 2.5 hours. And then after we ran it 6 times, by the sixth time we did it in like 20 minutes. It was just the natural progression of the first time you're learning it, and also you're a little low
Uh-huh.
level, and then by the time you've leveled up and learned the zone and you've done it a few times, I actually wiped the group on the second time I went in, because the first time someone else was pulling and I was just learning, kind of following along, and then the second time I was the puller and the tank. And we had gone in and we were at the boss section, and there's two wings left and right, and you have to clear both sides. And I had forgotten, because we did the right side first, and there's only one room on the right, and that undead person is back behind the corner. And then on the other side there's two rooms, and I had forgotten that. So I was like, I just kind of charged into the group that's by the corner, thinking that it was just going to be that group and one guy in the room. And then as I ran past the room, I was like, oh my god, there's another 5 mobs in there, and there's 2 mobs in there, and I just got these 5, and the whole group's following me into the mob, and we wiped because I just didn't know any better. Because you're learning it, the first time. And then I was thinking also Olderon, the first time we did Olderon, it was like 3 hours because we were way too low level. I think we were like 40 and 41, and like the boss mob was like 47. So the first time was very long, and then the last time we did it, I think was when I was 43. Um, and we did it in about 45 minutes. I was not tanking though. We had a level 56 tank, so obviously it's a little over leveled for that zone. But we just blew through it in like 45 minutes or so. There's something to
Also,
be said for learning.
one of the things that I like with the non dungeon fighter aspect, when you have a matchmaking system, you're forced to make things more following the rules. You have to have a tank, a healer, and some DD, because otherwise you will have people that are
Chaos, yeah.
cheating, and then people will fail, and then they will whine, and then they're not happy, and blah blah blah. While when you are creating your group by yourself, you can decide, well, I'm not really a tank, but I think I can handle the situation. Or
Well,
uh,
you
we,
can
we,
you
we
can
do
if you've
it.
got the right people behind you, yeah.
Yes, but you can agree with each other. Let's do it that way. Okay, we don't have a tank, but we don't care. I'm going to handle the things and blah blah. And you can make um, unconformist groups. I remember at the very beginning, I was playing World of Warcraft, and at that time, I was really, I didn't know much about it. So I remember we were three healers in a group, and the tank was a rogue, which was not a tank at all. So we had the rogue tanking because it was in leather armor, so it was more solid. We had a resto druid and two holy priests wanding mobs. It was just what the hell? But you could do that
Yeah, there
at
was
that
there was
time.
there was times in EverQuest 1 I can remember, because I had a ranger for my first like 7 years that I played that game, and rangers were not tanks, but we could wear chainmail. It's like we couldn't be in plate, but we could tank in a pinch in certain scenarios. So there were scenarios where we didn't have a tank, but we had a shaman, a cleric, and an enchanter in the group, which made it possible for me to tank because we had a cleric who could cast complete heal on me. We had an enchanter who could haste me, and we had a shaman who could buff the crap out of me, and then we also had the shaman and enchanter who were slowing and mezzing mobs. So it became feasible for me in those scenarios when we couldn't find a plate tank. We could actually still make forward progression and still
Yeah.
go into dungeons and do things. I mean, we couldn't do the hardest stuff, but we could do things using a unique setup. And then there were scenarios where we couldn't find a tank at all, or we didn't have a healer. So it was like, well, we've got a mage, we've got a ranger, we got a paladin. The paladin can kind of heal, but what we should do is, let's do this. I will snare the mobs, and we'll just kite the mobs around. I'll DPS kite the mob around, and you guys just run behind it, just beating on the mob. And then if it
Yeah.
turns on you, at least the paladin has enough of a heal that we can kind of handle those scenarios. But for the most part, we're just going to train around and kite. And those are the things too, where that thing about communication and being able to trust the other player that you're with comes into play. And I've never found that with the matchmaker system because most players who enter a matchmaking system, they don't want to take the time to do a unique
No.
group. They want the perfect group. That's why they've signed up for the matchmaker because they can clearly say, I am a tank and I want to automatically be grouped up with a healer, a DPS, and a DPS or whatever the makeup is because they want a perfect group scenario to just do that dungeon in 15 minutes as
Yeah.
opposed to those scenarios like you're talking about where it's you and your three friends and it's like, well, we can't find the perfect group, but we could still go out and do stuff just in a different way today.
Yeah,
um,
exactly. And I think it's very interesting. That's why um, those things where you create your group and you advertise, it's fair because then you can be looking for a group and say, oh, they don't have a healer. I'm not going to join that. I don't trust
exactly,
it.
or they don't have a
Or you
tank
can
yet.
say, well, I don't care. I'm going to see those guys and see how it goes. I think it's important also to realize that if you want to make new friends, if you want to recruit new people in your guild, sometimes to do a group dungeon is the best way to do it. I remember in Burning Crusade World of Warcraft, that was the way I was recruiting people. I was my team. I had a good tank. I was a healer. I was taking another DPS, and I was taking two pug. So we could get to know two new people. And hopefully, one of those people will want to join our guild. And I
Yeah.
was always say, oh, by the way, if you're looking for a guild, we're doing
Oh,
blah, blah,
I've
blah.
done the same thing over the years. We're actually still doing that in Warcraft Classic right now because we're trying to do guild runs that have at least 3 to 4 guild members in them, but one space open for a
Yeah,
non-guildie so that we can find people who are good players and get them invited.
exactly. It's a really good strategy to make new friends or find new guildies and new talents in your red group or whatever you want to do in a game.
By the way, you're right that we're not going to get to the need before greed stuff today. I was just
I
looking at how
knew
long
it.
I was looking at how long we've been going so far. I was like, yeah, we're that's going to be next week's topic, so it's all good.
Well, we have warned you guys.
I think
I'm not sorry.
from a raid perspective too, I know a lot of people will do pickup raids these days. I can say that I've never actually done a pickup raid ever. Um, and I think some of this was just I haven't raided in a long time. But being a raid leader for 7 years with a top 10 worldwide guild, we never needed to do pickup groups because we had our own raid force and we were able to clear at that top tier. And I know as things have either become more accessible or players know the encounters, um, there's not the need to have that elite force anymore. At least not for the vast majority of people. I know like the top tier guilds who are on Twitch and clearing like modern content as it comes out. Those are tight knit guilds, and that's what it takes to be at that elite level. Um, that requires trust, communication, friendship, etc. It's not just about joining willy nilly for a molten core run in Warcraft Classic when people have done it over the last 15 years and they know it backwards and forwards and there's no challenge to it anymore. It's just this is the strategy, this is what you need for resists, and this is how we're going to clear this area. Um, there's something to be said about a matchmaking system in the old days would never have worked for raids because
No,
it,
of
it
course not.
required a certain level of elite playstyle. And obviously, I don't know, we have a long way to go before we're designing raid content for our game, but I can imagine in my mind, I cannot imagine a scenario where we have pickup raids in Saga of Lucemia, at least not for the first time people clear the content.
But people can do a pickup raid. Like you're not a guild and you're just gathering new people. Why not?
Sure.
Sometimes it works better than a guild run
Well,
if your guild is
I
filled with idiot
I can even
or nice
remember
people that cannot play. Sorry, I
in
didn't mean
early
idiot.
it's all good. Early EverQuest on, I can remember before I started raiding full time, we did alliance guilds. So we had like 7 or 8 guilds in this alliance, and so we weren't all part of the same guild, but we all raided together on like Tuesdays and Saturday nights, if I remember correctly. So we all had our individual guilds that we'd go off and do stuff with on a nightly basis, but then 2 nights a week we would get together with this group of people who we would sort of know who they were. Um, but we never were able to clear the content nearly as well as once I joined an actual raid guild who was,
Of course not.
there's a different level of coordination.
But it's still doable. And to be a pug red leader require a lot more talent.
Mm.
Because you really need
And
to be
patience.
able to handle people in a certain way,
I don't have
unload people every time, to have your, I don't know, macro to explain the tactic every time.
I don't
You
have the
you will
patience
do
for that.
this, you will do that. No, yeah, but there is some people, and I've known because I've done a lot of pickup red in different periods in different games, that it's doable. I've also organized my own. If you organize yourself, you don't have too much expectation, and you ask everyone to be patient. If you're doing bug, you need to be more flexible and more patient, because you never know what you will fall on. There will be people of different skill and competence level or experience. There will be not an ideal setup. Not everyone will be prepared as they should. Well, if you're going with patience and you're doing a bug, it can be a very nice experience.
So I guess at the end of the day, in your mind, is a matchmaking system required for an MMORPG, or is it on a case by case basis for games?
I think it's a case by case for game. I think to have a looking for group tool is nice because it helps people that, like the introvert or whatever, the people that don't have time to really I'm looking for group, I'm a
Yeah.
DPS, yes, please take me. It can be tough. So just a tool like we have said that you have in several games. Final Fantasy is doing both system. World of Warcraft is doing both system. Guild Wars 2 only have the panel we were talking about. There's plenty of game that does it that way, and it worked very well. The matchmaking system can work in certain conditions. For that, you need to have a face-based type of game, because then you can chain the dungeon and you can have fun doing so. It's like chaining battleground, and it doesn't really matter, and it can be a fun experience anyway. And if you want, you can, it's like the Overwatch. When you team up with people, you can choose to stay as a team. If you enjoy the group you are in, you find they are good players, you say stay as a team, or you leave the game without the team.
And join a
And
different group. Yeah.
yes, and I think that maybe the gaming environment has evolved because we have new technology, we have new type of game, we have new type of players. It's a lot broader. So of course you will have more different experiences. And at the moment, I kind of enjoy that World of Warcraft will propose you both. So you have the dungeon finder if you want to do easy dungeon, and then you will have more challenging content if you want to do something more challenging. And if you want an adventure, well, you don't go WoW Retail, you go WoW Classic or another game.
All right,
So
folks. So there you have it. That's our discussion on matchmaking today, pros and cons. I would say let us know in the comments below. I mean, how do you feel about matchmaking? I know it's been a hot topic in Discord this week, so let's continue that conversation. Next week, we will talk about the D before greed system and loot in general, because we did
yeah.
not have time to get to that today, so we'll get to that next week. Thanks for tuning in. Stick
Thank you
around.
very much.
We'll see you
Take
next
care.
week.
Bye.